Truth without love is abuse. Hello, everybody. This is Rebekah Freedom, and I'd like to start the podcast today by saying thank you so much to John and all who are listening, who are ready to receive this message of healing. So today, we're going to talk about the topic of rape. I'm just going to let that hang in the air because you know somebody or you've been a victim of or possibly even a perpetrator of rape. And I want to open up about this topic, and it's deeply personal. And I'm doing this not for accolades or sympathy or any sort of attention seeking, but rather because I live by a code that the truth will set you free. And in my field of therapy, life coaching, even spiritual guidance, there's kind of two schools of thought. The first school, of course, is if you're going to be a practitioner, then you never share about your life. You just hold up a blank slate of which people can bounce off of. There's the middle way, I guess you would say, of people who are kitschy and use swear words and pop culture and different media outlets to sort of create an avatar, a personality that seems relatable. So there's the staunch sort of clinician, there's the relatable coach, and what I would like to think of myself as is the authentic specialist. And the reason that I say that is because I'm speaking from living. I'm speaking from a place of, sure, I have all the credentials and studies, but the way that I support my clients and my friends and the way that I cultivate my strength is by truly living life. And that's where this story sort of comes from. And before I really dive in, I want to say that I am a messenger. And so are you, so is everybody. And sometimes we use our voices to carry the message. Sometimes we use our bodies. And sometimes we pray. So with that, I'm going to share a little bit of my story around this topic of rape, and whatever emotion you hear is true to this moment. I have my hands tightly clenched, and I'm just aware that this is part of the process. So I came to understand earlier this week that the same things that hurt you can also heal you. And that is the context in which I'm telling this story. I've been deeply wounded by sex and physical exchange in a handful of ways, some more traumatic than others, some had more lasting psychological impact than others. And just this week, I've started to see the dawn break and realize that I can also be healed through touch and through love and through affection and by setting boundaries and by being heard. So that's the framework, and these are the details. So last year, I woke up early February and I felt this calling that it was time to leave Colorado, where I'd lived for a decade, and move to California. California was my birth state, so it was like a sense of coming home. And from that moment, I started to put things in preparation to come back. And there's the feeling of the last hurrah, the last shebang or whatever. So I started doing some dating and mating without the intent of procreating. And I I slept with a couple different people. And what happened was I was under quite a bit of stress because I was preparing to move. I lived with an alcoholic roommate who was completely passive aggressive and who was I'd hear him literally all 6'4" of him fall over in his room, and it would just be this loud thud. And so I didn't even really acknowledge how much stress I was under. But what happened is I met this guy and I hooked up with him and we slept together a couple of times. And one of the times it was unprotected. And that was after we had both been tested for STDs. So it was semi-responsible. And then a month went by and I didn't realize exactly what was happening, but I woke up one day with a really bad backache, and I thought, oh, it's just because I wore high heels. And within 24 hours, I was in urgent care, and they were like, we think you have meningitis. And my spine was swollen, my brain was swollen, and I went from urgent care to the ER where they just gave me Dilaudid, and then I went numb from the waist down. And after that happened, I was dehydrated. I went back to urgent care. The blessing was that I lived in Colorado, so pot really saved my life, actually. It gave me my appetite back. I was able to drink, and I had angels really taking care of me. You know who you are if you hear this, and thank you. So through much research and being my own advocate, I found out that herpes, HSV2, can cause meningitis. And so I went to Planned Parenthood and I got tested, and it came back that I did have HSV2. And of course, on top of the nerve damage that had happened, there was all the shame that was carried with it, and feeling like my body had let me down, that my choices were just so off the marker, and that that was an initial trauma. And much like life is, it's not one that I paid much attention to in lieu of getting ready to move. So the second trauma, albeit a little bit smaller, came when I called up my ex-boyfriend and I was like, I don't know what's going on. You're a massage therapist. Can you please come help me? And he came over, and I basically was kind of pushed to tell him, I'm leaving Colorado because of you. I can't be in the same state. And that came after he told me I have a new girlfriend and it's awesome. So I was sick. I didn't really know exactly what was going on. It took quite a bit of digging and research and a whole month of alternative healthcare, of acupuncture and rifing and massage. And thank God for my tribe out there again. And then eventually the launch happened. I just had to go with the body that I had, with the numbness, and just thought, well, maybe this will resolve itself and I'll just get to California and start there. And what ended up happening is the meningitis rerouted me because I was going to stay with family. But then they were like, you can't stay with us because we have a kid and we don't want you to be a threat to the child. And I didn't really know how to explain it because this was my first time ever dealing with something like this. So I found a place in Ojai, and rented a room. I actually stayed on the futon in this guy's library, and his house was like a mausoleum to 1980s journalism. And again, thank you. You know who you are if you are listening to this. And it was highly uncomfortable because the house was messy, and it just was a bachelor pad, and there were other men living there, and one of them was certifiably crazy. He slept with a knife in his room. Yeah, it was, but I'm a trooper. I'm a warrior. I've always been really independent and fearless in the regards of if I feel like I'm called to do something, I don't ever really sit and ask how for very long. I just act and make it up along the way, and nothing was different about this. So I had come out, I made a stop and saw my friend William in Yosemite before I came to Ojai. And then I got to Ojai, and then I started to get online and be like, oh, I wonder what guys are here because, you know, I'm new. Let me see who I can meet and if there's any connections. As a side note, Ojai is beautiful. And it's one of the most magical, mysterious places. And they call it the nest. Ojai means the nest. And it's full of feminine energy. And they say, whatever you haven't dealt with will show up. And that's what happened. I said to my ex, I'm leaving because of you. Well, I brought him with me energetically. And I met his energy in another person who was even more wounded. And I made a decision based on a need for comfort to go over to this guy's house because he happened to live 1 block from where I was staying. It was just coincidence. So we met first and went to the beach, and he told me about being a filmmaker and showed me some films, and he just talked about an ex-girlfriend that he wasn't over and how he loved his cats, and I thought he was really sweet, and he made me breakfast one morning. So I was like, okay, you know, I feel good enough, I guess, about this. And so one night I just didn't want to be on the futon. I didn't want to be in the house. I just wanted like some comfort. And I went over in my pajamas. I walked over around the block to this guy's house, and we started like fooling around, and I was sort of, you know, a participant in that. And it was my first time that I had been with somebody since I learned I had herpes. And they tell you that the responsible thing to do is to tell everybody I have herpes, whether it's cold sores or what. And I just want to say herpes is mono, it's chicken pox, there's 6 different types of it. And we don't have influenza support groups. You know, we don't have like, listen, I had the flu, threw up a lot. No one does, and no one does that. And it's a flu, it can kill you more than herpes can. I think there's just so much shame around it, just given how it impacts your body. And I will say, it's not, if you are one of those people who doesn't have it, then be happy at this point in your life, because 1 in 4 people really have it. So, and that's the thing that you'll learn if you have sex, just how prominent STDs or STIs are. It's not if you have it, it's about when. There's a matter of time and depending on your partners. I even know people who got married, did not have herpes before they got married, got it with their partner that they married. So it can lay dormant in your body for a really long time. And it can never present with any symptoms. Actually, 80% of people have it and are carriers and don't know they have it. It's more predominant in females than males. And it's just something I think it carries the energy of shame with it, which is one of the lowest vibration energies. But really, honestly, we have bodies and our bodies get viruses. Viruses are so prevalent, and viruses are nothing but a combination of molecules that host in your cells. And when they replicate, they kill off that particular cell. And so, there's bacteria and there's good and bad and all of it. And as a organism, you have many other organisms hosting in your body. Some of them benevolent, some of them not, some of them with symptoms, some of them not. And so what I would say that this has taught me is about my body, but I would also say there's a social pressure and an idea of what it means to be one of the 1 in 4. So I just want to really encourage anybody, if you're unsure about how to have the conversation, that you're not alone. If it's for the first time, it's a really scary conversation to have. So there I was in this guy's bedroom, and we were fooling around, and I didn't want to blurt out, I have herpes, because I didn't really know exactly how to have the conversation. So I said, you need a condom. You really need a condom. And then he said, well, you should have brought one. And the minute he said that, my soul split my body and I disassociated, and he had sex with me anyway without a condom. And I went into performance mode where I just knew how to writhe and move my muscles and just make it go as quickly as possible. And then after it was done, I was dismissed from his room. He's like, you can't stay over, but I'll walk you out the front door. And then I walked back to my place and felt very guilty for not telling him that I had herpes. So I carried that for 2 weeks, and I was also in the process of trying to find a new place to live. So life was unfolding on top of all of this. And essentially what happened is right before I moved from Ojai, I was able to have the conversation with him because I was like, that is the responsible thing to do. And he was like, at first he flipped out. He's like, I can't believe you took 2 weeks to tell me. And then he's like, you're going to have a hard time finding love. And he's like, you could have ruined my life for the rest of my life. And he's like, I'm sorry that happened to you. So what happened for me essentially is in 2015. That was probably the most traumatizing year around sex, sexuality, sexual expression, giving and receiving that I've ever been through. It created a massive wound and a complete distrust in my body, in men, overall, in masculine energy, and just transformed my ability to relate in relationship. And then something else happened. Like I'm resilient, and I just want to kind of give the framework of this. So when I was 20, my dad died and I finished my undergraduate. And then when I was 27, my mother died and I finished my master's. And when I was in my 30s, I got fired from my first job out of school and I started my own business. And then I went through the most apocalyptic breakup. And then I wrote a book about it. And that is the energy that I want, hopefully, is being translated, because I also have been through a situation where I was at a guy's house that I trusted from this conscious community that I was part of. And we were having a conversation. And he looks right at me. He says, well, I could rape you right now, but I'm not going to. And what I did from that moment was I wasn't quiet. I had a voice. I told the community, and it completely was a ripple through the community. I experienced what people who go through this experience, somehow it was my fault. I must have brought something on. I must have been salacious. I must be wrong. How I misinterpreted his meaning. He might have just been joking. It was not that big of a deal, right? How could somebody in this conscious community who is a leader really mean something like that? I must be off base. I must be off base. I must have provoked this. And I want to say, for those who are listening, you might be having this reaction. Oh, well, you went over to his house. You opened yourself to this. You present in a way that's very sexual and therefore are pulling that attention. And I would say, wouldn't it be beautiful if everybody could be expressed and safe in their sexuality? So I want to reference, there's this very clever video on tea and consent on YouTube. And it says, if you boil a pot of tea for somebody and you say, would you like to come over for tea? And they're like, heck yes, I would love to come over for tea. But then you boil the water, make the pot, and then they said, actually, in the time you take to make that, I don't want tea. Then you don't give them tea. And it goes on to say, if you make tea for somebody who's conscious, but then they're unconscious, you don't give them tea. You don't pour the tea down their throat. You make sure they're safe and do not make them tea. And of course, we can provide the link for that. But it's a very easy concept. If you can understand making tea for somebody and asking them if they would like tea, and then receiving their answer and responding accordingly, then you can understand consent when it comes to sex. And you can begin the act of sex. You can be enthralled with it. You can be naked and part of it. But if at any time either party, male or female, is like, no, I don't want to do this, or even starts crying, or if there's a pause or a hesitation, and oftentimes intoxication really prevents this, understand consent. And I think that I didn't even understand what happened. So what I want to say about this incident is a phrase that also comes from my field, is that victims are violent. And I don't want to go into what is a victim, what is not a victim. I want to share the structure of something called the drama triangle, where there's 3 different roles. There's the perpetrator, the rescuer, and the victim. And you see this, it's called a drama triangle because no one is empowered in these roles. If you're a perpetrator, you're acting from fear. You're not empowered. If you're a rescuer, you're acting from fear. You're not empowered. And if you're a victim, you're also acting from a place that is manipulative. It really, because a perpetrator doesn't exist without a victim, and a rescuer does not exist without a victim. And it's something we play out in the dramas on TV and in our personal lives and in our relationship, and sometimes even in our spiritual lives. We are looking for a savior. So what I want to say about that piece is that victims hold quite a bit of energy of supplication and rage and woundedness. So aren't we all victims, if that's the definition? And the person who acted in the way he did was extremely wounded, did not have the coping mechanisms to act from a place of boundaries, didn't really necessarily come from a place of respect. And so his pain, his woundedness got passed on to me. And I am certain that I've passed my pain on to other people by being angry, by being petulant, by being vicious, by being somebody who threw a tantrum. And so what I want to say too is I want to be really sensitive, because rape is something that happens with varying degrees of violence to it. The sex trafficking is very real. It's not something to be brushed over or ignored. And I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but it's very prevalent that there are majority cultures where women are commodities and our bodies are commodities. And ultimately, our bodies are how our souls come to know themselves. I'm going to say that again. We're infinite. We're one. We're connected. We have the ability to feel sorrow and devastation, and to feel the joy of healing and elation, and to ebb and flow in the Tao in the middle way, because we have bodies. I've heard it said that our bodies is how God smiles. And there's so much that will be encoded in your body, the experiences you have this lifetime, all varying in their trauma and in their healing. And I want to say that when your body, your boundary, your known boundary is violated, it rocks your soul. And I actually went into my unconscious space, and I was dealing with it in this last year by taking a lot of selfies, posting it, feeling sexuality and sexual in my own body, but afraid to really find a place to put it. So it came out sidewards in aggression, in I'm a tough girl, in a punishing way of like, look at me, don't touch me, that sort of like pinup mentality, and it just didn't present in a healthy, balanced way. It came out sidewards, and I didn't realize it, and I actually lost some friends over it, and had it reflected back to me that I was cutting and harsh, and it may have even led to the dismissal from a job to some degree, because I didn't have awareness. But God sends angels. He sends people into your life at the time you're ready to heal and receive. And so I want to really impress, if you're listening to this, it's not an accident, that this is something I can share with you to say that healing is possible, and that the depth of trauma, you can come back from it. And the way to do that is to fully embrace the present moment. All your power is right now. The power of the person or the event or whatever happened to you can only be one line in a great novel that is your life. And there's no need to reread that line over and over and over. And what I want to say is my body's still healing. You know, I still am dealing with the nerve damage, and it's a reminder of that thing. But I'm telling a story that I'm in the process of healing, and it's brought me to people that I wouldn't necessarily have met who are also healers and light workers and curious and want to know how to integrate body, soul, spirit, mind, all those things. So what is something that could be an inconvenience or a place that I dump my sorrows has become something that I'm alchemizing into revelation and awareness and clarity. And that is very possible. It's probable, and it can happen. And I would really like to mention that one of my mentors is David Deida, who's written several books. One of his most popular is The Way of the Superior Man and Dear Lover. And he is so articulate about masculine versus feminine energy. He's not talking about the shape of your genitalia, if you have a penis or a vagina. He's saying, what is your essence? What is your essence? Are you open and nurturing and, or are you penetrating and taking action? What is your essence? Where is that coming from? And I've lived in both. I've lived in both realms and played with both energies. So what I want to say is that in all of this, there has been another unconscious part of me that has been inviting the healing of, as he would put it, being ravished open to God by a man of deep integrity, spirituality, and sensitivity. It's a big deal. I guess I'd like to say that sort of energy felt cerebral. I can read about it and possibly experience it. And, I can play on a lot of different planes. I can have sex with friends or meet somebody new and just be physically intimate, but could I really be energetically transformed? So I will not go into great detail about this, except to say that all this awareness came up because I began talking to somebody who held such an energy of presence and of knowing themselves, and who is in the practice of polyamory. So, there's several different viewpoints of this. There's actually a vocabulary word called Compersion, which is that you receive joy from watching your lover get joy. So it doesn't mean you're a voyeur and watching them have sex. It's really, some of us experience that when an ex goes on to love somebody else and all that time and resent goes by, and you look at their face and you're like, oh, they're really happy. And you're genuinely happy. That's compersion. And so within the format of polyamory, there's the opportunity to really practice expanding your boundaries around love, around how you play with that energy. It can also be a place to hide. And the same is true for monogamy. If you want to be with somebody and deepen in that space, that's very well possible if you're willing to face your shadow and face your demons and to negotiate that space and to get through what John Gottman calls sliding door moments, where you have a chance to turn towards somebody or away from them. You have a chance to choose your needs over awareness of what might be happening for the other. And there's several formats that this happens in. So what happened for me was this particular person started presenting as just overtly sexual, domineering, a little rigid, polyamorous because they didn't want to deal with insecurities of others. And I still don't know the depth of what that's about. I mean, and it's not for me to know, But one conversation that happened ended up bringing this intense fear up for me. And in that moment, I was able to name what happened. That I was in a situation that I didn't even really call rape, that I felt an enormous amount of responsibility for, but a situation where it started consensual but did not end that way. And the clarity came off me, and about 1,000-pound weight was lifted. And then I was talking to girlfriends, and they were like, oh, you don't really know this person. He could be dangerous. He could blah, blah, blah. All the alarm bells kept going off, kept going off, kept going off. But something inside me was like, just stick with it. That was, stick with it. There's something else there. There's something else there. There's something else there. And so I proceeded to throw several tantrums. I proceeded to say we should stop talking, started wondering about his other girlfriends, started just, saying we're never going to really meet in person. Why, this is just a fantasy, and just throwing every single dagger and dart. And he came back with, is this what you're doing to me to get back at the person who did what they did to you? And he came back with a steadiness of hand and a language around desire, and a notion that entering into this space could be very healing, and that there's a possibility to do it differently and to have really deep conversations. And I would say that is the thing that I appreciate the most about the polyamorous community, is it takes a great deal of effort to navigate the complications of just a one-to-one relationship, let alone a relationship with multiple people all at once. And that comes with many different layers and many different configurations. Sometimes there'll just be branch relationships. Sometimes there'll be relationships where 3 people are all relating. It's challenging. And I would say sometimes people make the mistake of thinking, oh, if we just add another person, that'll fix our problems. It will amplify your problems. It will amplify. And ultimately, that's, for me, the things that have been in my shadow, the things that have been in my subconscious, the things that I haven't been willing to look at, I'm writhing and I'm squirming because the interaction with this person who is holding steady are drawing them out. They're drawing them out. And my need to take selfies has diminished exponentially. And I'm realizing that I was grasping for connection and for a sense of power, a sense of being noticed in that safe space. And that's the thing about rape, is you think, I'm never going to be safe again. I'm not going to be safe. My body's not safe. My thoughts are not safe. The choices I make are not safe. Love is not safe. Lust is not safe. I'm just not safe. And often you live disassociated and from a primal place of just trying to get some basic needs met, and sometimes repeat the pattern over and over, only reinforcing that you're not safe, that human interaction is not safe, that sometimes the only safe thing is to do drugs or to drink, to escape, to further the violence against yourself. And it's a vicious cycle. And the reality is that I have had these powerful conversations, and that the same thing that hurt me is now healing. And it's healing because I'm getting myself back. And that's what I want to share. That there's hope and there's healing. And my hope is that I can help people heal and be an advocate and a voice for those who don't have a voice, for those who still are in shame or scared. And it's not about the details. It's not about the story or the event or what happened. Certainly that is the thing that put things in motion, but it's about the harnessing of that energy so that it doesn't remain in the shadow, but can be brought into the light so that a new reality, a new framework, a new form of power can be harnessed and exacted into the world so that you can then be a powerful force for change and for transformation. And that is my intention. And if I was successful in this sharing, in this storytelling, I hope you're sitting wherever you're sitting, breathing deeply, being curious, coming fully into this moment, so fully into this moment that you can feel your oneness. Me too. Me too. I have hurt. I've been hurt, but there's more for me than just that story. And I love you, and thank you for listening. I want to hear your story and empower you to more. So you can connect with me at www.RebekahFreedom.com, spelled REBEKAH, Freedom, FREEDOM, RebekahFreedom.com.